So packaging a persistence unit. So after creating all the entity being class, we need to package it into a persistence unit, and together we call it as persistence unit. So all the things whatever we are making use of, the set of all the classes is called as persistence unit. A persistence unit is defined as defined inside the Hi friends, now let us continue our discussion based upon our persistence unit. So in the previous lecture we have seen how the classes of entity look like and how we are trying to create the plain old Java objects. So in this particular session we are just trying to see how these classes are being packaged together and what all we need whenever we are trying to package the things. So whenever we are trying to package the things into a particular jar file, then the most important thing is we need to write a deployment descriptor in the form of persistence.xml to write all the persistence unit classes and all the queries related with it. So all these are described inside the Java Persistence API specification 2 which is given in the section of the textbook in 8.21 inside the EJP textbook. So the deployment descriptor has to have this particular specification. So how exactly this particular file or where exactly it is located, let us see about this. So an EJB file is nothing but the persistence.xml is the file, and it is called the root of all the persistence unit. So and this may be something like EJB jar file which is present inside web-inf classes directory of a var file, that is web archive file, or jar file in the web-inf library /lib directory of var file, or jar file in AR enterprise architecture archive file library directory, or an application client jar file. So this may be anywhere within this. So the structure of one of these jar files may look like the following, that is meta-inf persistence.xml, and this is your persistence XML deployment descriptor, and the employee class will be present inside org/example, org/example/entity, and org/example/entity/employee.class. So here we will be having our .class file. So this persistence.xml will be having the deployment description or the description of all the fields and the operations present inside this employee.class file. So let us see the example of a persistence.xml, how exactly it looks like. Normally we see this particular XML version tag where we have the XML version with the encoding. Then here we find the XML version of persistence. So the persistence XML NS, that is name will be which is present inside this particular address. So this is nothing but the references of the online source of the persistence.xml, how it should look like and everything. So this is even found in normal HTML, XML, HTML or doc type tag and everything. So this is that particular type of tag. Then next we have this is the main important persistence unit. So where we have the persistence unit name, and we need to give the unit name there. Then JTA, that is Java Transaction API with the data source, and we give the data source name in the form of one JNDI, the data source name inside the Java naming and directory interface. That will be your data source. Then we will even set the properties if it is having any by making use of all the standard properties. Provide a specific configuration. Then the property will be my provider.property.name and so on, and we will be having some values for that. So we can list any number of properties associated with that particular entity or name of the unit name. So after this we just close the persistence unit and close the persistence. So this will be our deployment descriptor in the form of persistence.xml. So how the class looks like. So here we are saying that the persistence is outside tag, and inside that we have a persistence unit name, that is name of my persistence unit, and we'll be having the jar file. We need to specify that jar file's path exactly. Here we are using the path as /lib/employee.jar, and we are giving the jar file name, and we just close the persistence unit and the persistence tags inside the persistence.xml for the persistence unit class set. Similarly, we are giving even the entity name also. So here the entity name is being given as employee, and if are having any other classes inside that particular persistence unit, then we may also have that particular name of the entities whatever we are trying to use. So similarly, we can use even exclude unlisted classes also inside the persistence unit, because some of them may not work inside the, we don't need to make use of them inside the databases, so we can exclude those unlisted classes elements inside the persistence unit by using exclude. Like whenever we are using any employee, let us say there are 5 fields, and if I need to use only 4 and I want to exclude one, then we may use this and exclude unlisted classes. So the final set of classes is determined by union of all the following metadata, where they are annotated with entity in the persistence.xml file jar file. So unless exclude unlisted class is specified, so classes annotated with @entity are contained inside any jars listed with any of the jar file elements. So classes mapped in the meta inf warm.xml file if it exists, and XML files with the mapping file element are also put inside the package, and classes are listed with any class elements are also listed inside the persistence unit of our EJB. Entity manager. So what is entity manager? So entity manager is nothing but we are making use of the packaged and deployed our persistence unit to need the to make use of that in the future use for our application. So what how this application must work and how it must be managed will be work is the work of entity manager. So through this entity manager we can save the data, update the data, we can remove the data, or put some queries to your entity beans using the entity manager within your databases. So this is done by using one class called as entity manager factory, which is present in java x.persistence. So how does it look like? So we can see here it is java.persistence.metamodel, and we are using the persistence.criteria builder, and here we are trying to create entity manager, create entity manager, then we are giving the two overloaded forms here, then create builder, get creator criteria builder, then meta model, get meta model. Meta model is nothing but the model how exactly the data looks like, or information about the entity whatever we are trying to work with. Then whether it is open, we'll check it using the boolean variable, then close, then we just make use of the mapping function to get the properties with the object and the string, and we also make use of some get cache method to get the cache, and we also make use of persistence unit by using get persistence unit utility. So for enterprise applications in to work with this, we can make use of the java x.persistence annotation, wherein we make use of the target type with the method and the field, and the retention time must be specified. It must be returned runtime or the page time or whatever it is, so depending upon the scope of that particular code. So here we are using at the rate of interface persistence unit, and the name and the unit name will be specified by making use of this annotation called as persistence unit. The unit name is the identity of the persistence unit. So the container is responsible for noticing the at the rate of persistence unit annotation and inject the things correctly into the factory whatever we have specified in the form of manager factory. Then here we are trying to make use of unstateless session bean to work with this. So we are creating at the rate of persistence unit name will be the JNDI name whatever we have given. We are creating two variables of entity manager factory, that is factory 1 and factory 2, and we are trying to make use of setting the factory 2 with the entity manager f whatever this dot factory 2 equals to f. So we are assigning the entity manager to the entity whatever we have mentioned inside the GNDI. Then we need to get even the persistence context. It can be done by using joint transaction method by using JTA enabled entity manager factory. So here we are having a java.persistence context annotation, how exactly it looks like. So here we are using one persistence property to retrieve the information of name and value. Then the target of this is method field retention time. So we are using the persistence context where the string name by default it will be blank and the unit name will be by default blank, and the persistence context type will be default persistent context type dot transaction, which is nothing but transaction type. So we have seen extended transaction and transaction. So these are the two types of persistence units. So here we are using transaction. So we are setting the properties of all this to default. So this is how our entity manager will be injected using @javax.persistence. So similarly, the persistence context annotation works in much the same way as a persistence unit. So here also we make use of the entity manager along with the JNDI name, which is using the business implementation of our application. So how to interact with the entity manager? So the previous thing was in the section codes. Now we can see the full code of the interface called as entity manager and how to interact with it. So the interface called as entity manager is having many methods through which we can work with the our entity or the table present inside the database. So here we have meta model criteria in the form of import statements, and even the persistence as the import statements. And here we can find persist, merge, remove, find. Merge is for merging the entities with the previous one. Then remove is for deleting the tuple. Then find is for find query is to find the particular element. Then make use of the different versions of the find function with many of the overloaded forms. So similarly we have the get flush mode, then locking the systems, then we have refresh, then we have detach, we have lock model to get lock mode, then we have set property, then we have create query. So all these things are nothing but the things which are related with working with any of the database application using the entity manager. So similarly we can see we have something called as create native query, wherein we can give the SQL string, same like our JDBC programs, wherein we are giving the SQL string as well. So along with the built-in functions, we can also enable some user defined SQL queries to our database by making use of this create native query function. So how we are trying to find and update the entities? So we are just finding the things by making use of the find function, and here we are using the generic type of variables for all these things. Then we are getting the reference of it, and by using all this we can make use of the merge function, refresh function, contains for checking the contents of the particular employee and everything. Then we clear the things and flush the things into our database. Then persisting entities. So persisting entities is the act of inserting it within a database. We persist entities that have not yet been created in the database. To create an entity, we first allocate an instance of it, set its properties, and wire up any relationships to have the other objects. So we have already seen this. So how to make use of the query? We use the typed query, then create native query. So for the typed query, we create the query. Then for we create the query in the runtime, and for create native query, we save the things for later use inside the native query. So similarly, we use the JVA query language statement by making use of entity manager.create query, then give the query name. So we can remove the entity by using the remove function. So this is how about we are working with the entity bean. And when we are coming to the entity relationship, we have 7 relationship types: one-to-one, which is unidirectional; one-to-one, which is bidirectional; one-to-many, unidirectional; one-to-many, bidirectional; many-to-one, unidirectional; many-to-many, unidirectional; many-to-many, bidirectional. So these relationships are already known to us in the form of database, and this can be implemented by making use of the persistence unit as well, by making use of the relationships in a proper